fragments were discovered here in 11 caves in 1947 and 1956. Probably the most important discovery of our time, the scrolls have had great impact on biblical scholarship. Most curious among them is the Copper Scroll, which lists 64 hiding places in Israel of treasures such as silver and gold, aromatics and manuscripts, believed to be from Solomon's temple, and possibly hidden prior to the destruction of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar in 587 BC. There are also stories of such figures as Enoch, Noah, and Abraham. Josephus wrote, "And after this purification is over, they everyone meet together in an apartment of their own, into which it is not permitted to any of another sect to enter, while they go after a pure manner, into the dining room as into a certain holy temple." The party learned that these 2,000-year-old scripts are identical to our Bible today. Mount Masada, on the eastern fringes of the Judean desert, was another place not to be missed on the journey. Situated between Engedi and Sodom, it is detached from the surrounding escarpment, approximately 650 by 450 meters and 450 meters above Dead Sea level. Being remote and with natural defenses, an impressive fortress was built on the plateau during the Second Temple period. The story of Masada is recorded by Flavius Josephus, who commanded the Galilee district during the Great Revolt and eventually surrendered to the Romans. He was taken to Rome, where he chronicled the revolt for posterity. Josephus wrote that the first fortress at Masada was built by Jonathan, probable brother of Judah the Maccabee, high priest in 152 BC. Herod ruled from 37 to 4 BC and was aware of the strategic importance of Masada. Unsurprisingly, he chose to take refuge here from his enemies and used it as a winter palace. During his reign, palaces, storerooms, cisterns, and a large casement wall were built, and after his death in 4 BC, the Romans stationed a garrison there. According to Josephus the Great, revolt of the Jews against the Romans began in 66 AD, and a varied group, including Essenes and Samaritans, fled to the fortress. These were joined by the last of the rebels in 70 AD, after the fall and destruction of Jerusalem, when the fortress was under the command of Eleazar ben Yair. It was the largest rebel stronghold in Judah, and Flavius Silva laid siege to it with 8,000 men. Auxiliary troops camped at the base of the mountain and a great ramp was built on a natural slope to the west using wooden supports. This can still be seen here. After a few months, the besiegers brought up a siege tower to begin battering the walls. Josephus describes how Eleazar ben Yair made 2 speeches, convincing the 960 defenders that it would be better to kill themselves and their families than to face shame and humiliation as Roman slaves. He tells of 10 people chosen to act as executioners. People embraced them, offering their throats to the knife, and when this was done, the executioners turned on one another, the last killing himself. They died in the firm belief that no one survived. 2 women and 5 children, however, had been hiding among the cisterns on the mountaintop and described to the Roman soldiers what had occurred that dreadful night. It was the first day of Passover. The fall of Masada was the final act of the Roman conquest of Judah. The fortress at Masada is not mentioned in the Bible, yet it is a popular tourist destination and thousands visit it every year. Few, if any, know that to get there, they must drive through the ruined city of Gomorrah. The views from the mountain are breathtaking, and you can clearly see the ashes. What better way for God to remind us what happened to the ungodly, and what will happen to us if we do not repent from our sins? Peter chapter 2, verse 6. If he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them into ashes and making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. The group wished to visit Zoar as they had Admah to see if anything remained of the town. They knew that Zoar was one of the 5 cities destroyed by brimstone, but not if anything remained of it. Genesis 19 tells us of how Lot and his family fled to this area to escape the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Simon knew of a place named Al-Safi, also called Zoar, and they elected to try this. They set off for the farthest point of the Dead Sea area, and to their disappointment were confronted by the Jordanian border. Imagine the frustration as they looked at their goal through a border fence, within filming distance, but unapproachable. Even worse, there was said to be a site called Lot's Monastery in the hills above the town. This was another place that Lot visited with his daughters during his flight to the caves. Genesis 19, verse 30. Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. Staring across the border, they began to realize that even more traveling was on hand. 5 minutes was about to become 6 hours. All were determined to see this piece of biblical history. They now had to travel back, past Sodom, Gomorrah, Engedi, and Qumran, to Jericho, Admah, and the border bridge with Jordan on the opposite side of the Dead Sea. They reached the border after a 3-hour drive, only to take another hour to cross it. The party became a little concerned when Simon was told to put the camera away by an armed border guard. Finally, they were across and they hired a taxi and took off on another 3-hour drive to just short of their starting point, but on the other side of the fence. Everyone was quite surprised by the differences between Israel and Jordan. The military were very much in evidence here, and they constantly passed through roadblocks guarded by armored vehicles. The houses were very different from the UK, being mostly box-like and single-story. They stopped for refreshment at some local shops when Einar, being the daring one of the team, decided to start filming. Suddenly, they were surrounded by children who just stared at them in fascination. Just as they were resuming the journey, the driver suddenly pointed to a rock on the cliffs and informed them that this was Lot's wife. This they didn't believe, as it was too far from Sodom and on the wrong side of the Dead Sea. Excitement grew as they neared their destination, and on the right was the tip of the Dead Sea. They had completed the long circular journey begun 6 hours ago and were now back at its southern tip. Finding a sign indicating that Lot's monastery lay somewhere ahead, they gratefully left the taxi. The remains of a building could be seen halfway up a nearby mountainside, and this was reputed to be the most significant archaeological site in the whole of Jordan. A large meandering staircase was cut into the side of the mountain, and everyone eyed it with some misgivings. There was nothing for it but to climb. And after several rest stops, the mood lightened as they approached the ruins of an ancient monastery. Built around the entrance to a cave sometime in the 6th century AD. The cave is set at the far end of the north aisle, and the fine mosaic work is perfectly preserved. To the right is a huge reservoir, which made monastic life possible. The party eventually entered the cave and were amazed to be confronted by masonry and brickwork, which archaeologists have dated to the time of Abraham. Genesis 19, verse 36. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The elder daughter had a son, and she named him Mobe. He is the father of the Moabites today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites of today. It is believed